Alrighty, YouTube says I'm live. Hi, everybody, and as always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. Mostly, oh goodness, mostly this interview, mostly this live stream, I'm going to be speaking about jobs, ways people make a buck in prison. You got the state jobs, the things the state gives you and assigns to you that you have to do, but everybody's got to hustle. If you can't hustle, you better have some people that send you money because prison's a little cutthroat for that. I had a question from the comments from Dwyer Jones asking how, if you have a job lined up, it might impact the parole board's determination of your suitability for parole. That's actually an interesting question, and there are a number of factors that the parole board is able to deny somebody for. They can't deny somebody parole capriciously or arbitrarily. They can't just say, we don't like you, so we're not going to parole you. They also can't say, we're not going to parole you because the thing you did was so terrible, regardless of what it is. And even imagining a terrible example where somebody murdered someone in cold blood and they're doing time for it, and they go before the parole board can't simply say, well, because of that terrible thing you did, we're not going to parole you. You see, that was already litigated in court. The guy pled 15 to life, for instance, or was convicted by a jury and received a sentence of 15 to life. That's why he's going in front of the board. So the board has to look for current reasons to deny them, not based upon their commitment factors. A common one is suitability for employment. The parole board generally suggests that inmates have completed three sets of vocational training, meaning that you've taken a course behind the wall at the prison, you got on a list for it. It can be a pain to get one of these courses done. They take about 6 months, and you have to apply. But they're generally available at every prison. While I was incarcerated, as I recall, I completed a full course of office services, meaning that I did the Microsoft Word and all of that, and was getting my Small Engine Association accreditation whenever I was transferred out of that class. Lifers, if they're going before a parole board, just as a matter of course, had better have 3 completed vocations and ideally letters from the instructor saying that they did really good in those fields, because it makes it so the parole board can't deny you based upon suitability for employment. And that really has to be the way that lifers look at going to the board, is they better have already answered any reason they could be denied, because that's the board's job, is to look for a reason to keep them in prison. I understand it's a little more liberal and loose nowadays than it was whenever I was doing time. The lifers kind of just get paroled if they do their time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it is definitely a change in perspective. I think of lifers as having to just work every day if they want to go home. Scooby is doing great, and as far as suitability for employment goes, he's getting his paralegal certification. I've corresponded with him a couple of times. I thought about putting up screenshots of the letters back and forth, but I feel like at least for him to say that he doesn't mind our personal communications going up, and I'd have to make sure I didn't say anything that was embarrassing. I don't think I did, but I wasn't writing with the intent of publication. The underlying theme, as I said, of the live stream today is probably going to be jobs. I want to note that I've had some internet problems from Spectrum. So if I just cut out, listen, I'm sorry, it has something to do with the weather or something. They've said that there's nothing they can do about it. And I'm going to keep complaining, but my internet's cut out a number of times today. So I'm sorry if it does. I guess that's beyond my control. The first job that I had while I was incarcerated, and I've spoken about it before, wasn't exactly a job. I wanted to get some kind of employment. It's called A1A status, meaning that you have had a job before, that you had a job and you worked and there wasn't some reason that you can't work. They give you this status once you've had your first job, even if you lose it, if you get transferred, if you get taken out of the position for any reason outside of incompetence, essentially, you keep your A1A status. Well, incompetence or wrongdoing. A lot of people steal or fight, and you can also lose jobs for that, of course. I wanted to get that A1A status pretty bad because basically if you have A1A status, you're at the top of every list for a job, which is a bummer for anybody who doesn't have this status because jobs are few and far between on active, long-term, level 4 yards, guys doing time. After all, if everybody's doing 20 or 30 years on the yard, you better believe that all the good jobs have people that are determined to keep them. Getting a 1A status, it's kind of a catch-22. They give you a 1A status once you've had a job and shown you can work, but once you've done that, you're also at the top of the list for jobs. So people without a 1A status are out. What I figured, and I've talked about it, so I'll only briefly touch on it, was that I have a right to an education. It's in all of the court documents. Your right to due process descends from your ability to read and write. And obviously so, you can't expect somebody to navigate the pitfalls of the judicial system if they're illiterate. So I just complained, hey, I'm illiterate. Here is my very carefully and well-worded written document complaining about my illiteracy. I'm formally filing it with the prison and requesting that I be taught to read and write. They had me retaking my education test and into a classroom in just a couple of weeks, and then I was A1A. From there, that was my first job, and I tested out, and I had many other jobs since, but that was the hardest thing, is getting that first job. Once I had a job, I transferred from there to clerk jobs primarily, and I've talked about being a clerk, where my job was if somebody got in trouble, the cops would write out a shorthand account of what had happened. I saw Frank and Bob fighting, and then Bob pulled a knife and tried to stab Frank, and Frank ran away. And then I would have to write that in such a manner that it could be presented as evidence in court without inventing any facts or anything like that. My job wasn't to make a case against an inmate. It was just to type up what the cop had said. So I would say the exact same thing, but the way it should read in proper English. It would have read, while performing my job duties as floor officer 2 in building E3 at approximately 1,700 hours, I saw inmate Castaneda assault inmate Franco with a closed fist from a bladed stance. Inmate Franco responded by drawing an inmate-manufactured weapon of approximately 3 inches in length. Inmate Castaneda then fled the scene. I activated my personal alarm. The gunner responded for all inmates to get down, and control of the scene was gained by responding staff. It's the same thing, it's just that the one reads like it was written by a correctional professional and the other less so, often because the correctional officers, as well as the inmates, are illiterate, but also just because they're busy, and honestly, why wouldn't they have somebody else do their job for them if they could? I get paid 17 cents an hour, they earn $27 an hour. It's real easy math. Who should be doing this gut work? Outside of that type of job, the program clerk, lieutenant's clerk, sergeant's clerk, it's any kind of job like that where you're the clerk of an administrative official. There are a lot of other jobs that I did while incarcerated that I'll talk about eventually, but I want to touch on some of the neat hustles that I've seen that guys did while incarcerated. Last live stream, I talked about Maytag, and that is the bottom of the hustle list. You can land anywhere, and you can just write, I'm a Maytag, I wash clothes, come by my cell, and you can make enough money that you're going to do just fine. It's a trickle-down economy. There's one dude getting $300 a month of stuff because he has some money or because his family takes care of him. He can't spend all that money unless he's doing drugs. You only eat so much, you only throw so much around, so he sets aside about $50 or $75 for what we'll call quality of life expenses. He's looking for somebody to do his laundry, for somebody to cook his food. As a result, I guess we'll call them the 1% of inmates, the guys that have a little bit of money coming in, it goes down real easily to other people who want to make a couple of bucks. I actually saw somebody taking the tests, the TABE test that I just described. He would, and this is a serious rule violation, but I legitimately never saw him get caught. He'd just show up at the school with that guy's ID, and yeah, I'm him. I guess the cop who looked at IDs or the teacher who handed out tests or something must have known and not cared. But I saw this guy make at least $100 at $10 a pop. Yeah, sure, I'll show up and pass the TABE test so that you don't have to go to school and learn how to read and write for you. I understand there's people out on the streets that do it too. If you want to get your GED or some diploma or something, you can hire somebody off Craigslist to pretend to be you and go take the test. I have no idea how criminal it is out in the real world what you're risking, but in prison, I never saw anybody get caught for it. Guys lied about who they were. Look, not consistently. I don't want to sell it like everybody's walking around with the fake ID, but I saw at least 5 or 6 different times somebody just say they were one guy and not be him because they looked close enough and the cops didn't care. A scary thought, honestly. You have to wonder what happens if you sleep through your parole date and your buddy Frank thought, man, I look just like Aaron. And you know what? I know that he's going to sleep in just a little bit if I turn off his alarm clock and grab that ID. I've never heard of it happening, but I really do wonder if it would be possible, because even when I was paroling, it felt pro forma. Yes, they looked at me. Yes, they made sure I was me. They asked me a question or two. But it felt like if anybody had put in the man hours to find somebody that they looked like that person and get some details on their life, well, maybe they could have just walked out the front door. That's a scary thought, really. How much do Maytags get paid? That's an interesting question, and it does vary based on what yard you're on. I've spoken about being at SADF and D yard, and this was what's called a PIA yard, meaning that Prison Industry Authority, PIA, they make everything of some type for the prison. Here at SADF, it was peanut butter and bread and a couple of other items. And all of the CDC, all the little peanut butter packs, all the bread packs, things like that, they get packaged up and perhaps even made there at this one prison. It streamlines, I guess you call it, the private economy, the PIA economy, the Prison Industry Authority economy. That in the main kitchen. Anybody who wanted could make 50 cents an hour, so who worked 70 cents an hour. And I'm saying that like it's a lot of money because that's 3 or 4 living wage just about anywhere else in CDC. As a result, even if you didn't have a good job, I had a main kitchen job there where I was going to be working in the vegetable room, and I hated it. I got out of it. Somebody else got that good job, and I was just fine. If I'd wanted to be a Maytag, I probably could have made $10, $15 a day just washing clothes for people. 50 cents a pair of pants, 25 cents a shirt. It sounds like a lot or a little, depending on how you evaluate your time. But I guarantee you it adds up by the end of the day. Other yards where there's less money, let's say a reception yard, for instance, where there's a lot of fluctuation, guys are just doing a couple of months, it's hard living. You go ahead and scrub until your hands are raw, and you're going to get maybe your pack of cigarettes or your couple of soups or whatever it was you wanted at the end of the week. You can get by, but you're not making $5 or $10 a day. You're absolutely not. Because there's 30 other people that would be happy to do that job. There's no other jobs around. It's a little micro economy. I suppose it gives me an interesting perspective on the macro economy whenever people talk about the economy out here in the U.S. and the real world, because I'm used to thinking in such a small framework. I'm thinking, well, PIA is closed for a couple of weeks, so nobody's working at their peanut butter jobs, and man, money's going to be tight on the yard. I suppose that's a prison recession is what we would call it whenever they shut down the PIA. Let's see here. Do I have any interesting comments I'd like to respond to? Hi, Corey. Did a lot of guys push up on you about your job, to help them out? Man, that's actually, and it varied. I can tell you whenever I was active at High Desert, nobody pushed up on me, but there was an understanding. I mean, there was a certain degree to which I just had to be a convict. If it had come out that, I knew they were doing searches and I didn't find a way to come out on the yard and get in the fence and go, hey, Frank, come here, man. I don't know if they would have stabbed me over it. That seems like a big word for that kind of thing, but that's an active betrayal. You don't get to go, hey, guys, sorry, it's my job. I just got to do what I got to do. Now, mind you, there is only so much that you can do in that position, and I did set about whenever I first got that job as a clerk. I went and talked to the shot callers and explained the position I was in. And, of course, they knew the position I was in, other guys that had this job. And we came to an understanding about what I'd do for them and how much was too much, that, I just wasn't going to go in there and beat up a cop and get sent to the hole to make a point because they told me to. Not that I told them explicitly that was something I wouldn't do, but they knew better than to push the line of what they could get out of me that far, because it wouldn't have worked for them. It's not that they were doing it as a courtesy for me. It's that if they asked for too much, I'm out of the job, and they lost a resource. It's a funny thing about, I was going to say prison, but I guess the real world, too, is you are a resource to other people. Joining a gang is kind of like getting hired at a factory or something like that. They want to look you up and down and get a feel for what you can bring to the table. Because if you're just going to, sit there and not be a part of the gang, why should they let you get your little tattoo on the side of your neck saying you're a part of the gang? You contribute and they help you out. I suppose it's, again, a little economy of sorts. Ijar1020 asks, you buy ice cream at the prison commissary? And I do have a funny story about Phil Spector wanting to buy ice cream at SADF, the prison that I was at in Corcoran. You see, almost every prison sells ice cream. It's not a big deal. You can buy a little pint of ice cream for $2. Some prisons even have something called funny money, where you get a little card. It's a debit card, and you can just walk up right then and just get an ice cream and a soda and swipe your card, like a vending machine style thing. The only prison I ever heard at that didn't have ice cream was there at SADF. And from the day that he arrived, old Phil Spector was angry about this. We had it set up, and look, I know I've told this story, but it came up, so anybody who's bored, I won't make it too long. But man, Phil wanted that ice cream. We had it set up where the warden was going to let him buy a cooler for the yard we were on, E-Yard. And that's because they had a big freezer there at the main warehouse, but there are 7 yards, alphanumeric yards, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then they have in each one the buildings. Those are the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you're in A1, you mean you're in yard A, building 1. All of the yards have individual canteens. A yard has a canteen, B yard has a canteen. We had arranged for Phil to buy a industrial freezer for E yard. I seem to recall it was $25,000 or something like that. It was a good chunk of money, but it was because it had to actually be installed with union labor and all that, and it had to come from the right factory. And he was signing off on it, and at the last minute, the captain or the warden, whoever the heck it was, he pulled the document and basically said, look, if you want to buy this for 1 yard, you got to buy it for all 7 yards. And that wasn't going to happen. Phil Spector stomped his foot and did his little, I'm not going to pay for everybody yell, which I almost feel bad making fun of his voice now that I've found out that he actually had a medical condition. But I disliked the guy so actively, and you know what? I'll just go ahead and keep making fun of him. It's funny, and he had a funny voice, and that's what it is. He had a funny wig, too, but they didn't let him bring that in. Jason McGinnis says, what's up, Jewy? And Justin McCoy says, I think Jason might be a turd. This is pretty cool, actually, and thank you for the guys in the live stream. I have 1 or 2 friends from whenever I was incarcerated who have found out that I'm doing this channel and are supporting me. They called me up and said, hey, we hope you're doing great, and thanks, guys. Listen, I'm going to keep doing this for a long time, and it will be so cool in a year from now to be able to say, and I remember when. I'm 18 minutes into this live stream, and I intend to run it for about a half hour this time, I think. That'll be until 5:30. If anybody has a specific question about doing time or anything interesting I might talk about, I don't mind focusing on it. Otherwise, I'll probably just keep talking about jobs in prison because there's such a variety. It was always funny to me that there aren't enough jobs in prison, that I said, hey, I'd like a job. You don't have to pay me. I just want to work. And that the response was, you have to wait. In a year or two, we'll get to you. It's just there aren't enough jobs. I know that 50 years ago, there were enough jobs. They had guys on chain gangs breaking rocks or whatever the heck it was. There were walls that needed to be scrubbed. I literally said, well, why don't you just give me a bucket and a sponge and have me go clean up the day room? And they explained that any position that inmates are going to be employed in has to be approved by a committee. It has to, bureaucracy, paperwork. But what a strange situation to be in, to say, hey, I want to volunteer, work for free, you don't have to pay me. And somebody says no, and kind of talks down to you like you're the idiot. And I suppose I was, because I didn't see a heck of a lot of other guys arguing for this. They knew what was going on, and I didn't, so maybe I was the idiot. Am I going to do any interviews with other channels? David Moses. Heck, I reached out to an awful lot of channels talking about the Shane case, and nobody was super interested except the guys who did videos, and I especially want to call out the one or two who did, because that was way decent of them to talk about something that just appalled me. What a miscarriage of justice. I've reached out since just on, hey, do you want to talk to me? And I'm hopeful to do some interviews soon. Tony from Stories Written by a Current Prisoner said that he was interested in doing an interview with me. I guess I'll call him again because it fizzled. But yeah, y'all are going to be seeing me around. I started this channel. Wow, I started this channel 8 months ago, there for New Year's, and I don't know what I thought it was going to turn into. But I sure am excited that people are watching it, however many might be, and I intend to continue doing it. I intend to get my technical skills a little better. I know the videos are a little rough, and everybody has been very supportive. Shane Goldsby, absolutely, that is the name. I'm sorry, I get a little flustered on camera occasionally. I'm sure everybody does, but since I've only got a couple of people watching, I can say it. Man, I occasionally just want to put a hand over the camera and take 3 breaths. I'm sure I'll get used to it over time. You know, I am looking for something funny. The ice cream on the commissary with Phil Spector, he was bitter about that for the remainder of his time, and I don't know if they had ice cream where he went before he died. I'm of two minds. I guess I'm just going to have to hope the guy got his gallon of ice cream or whatever it was that would have made him happy. It seems small to not want him to have gotten his treat, being as how he's now gone. There are a lot of hustles people can do in prison. Now, one thing that I did for a hustle that you probably wouldn't have thought of is I typed, especially since I had a typewriter that had a memory in it, meaning if I typed one copy of something, I could print out 3 or 4. It very common for somebody to want to send a letter to a family member and retain a copy and be unable to do it, or perhaps to submit legal work and want to print out 2 copies of it, or need it to have certain formatting, certain line spacing. And whenever you're dealing with, gosh, your freedom, I mean, you cannot overemphasize how important an appeal is to somebody. Of course, you're willing to pay $5 or $10 for the guy to type it outright instead of the guy down the way to do it with a line pen and very carefully put in the margins. How do you shave in level 4 prisons? They have a system. If you're in a real secure facility, they shower you 3 times a week. And to be clear, what they mean by 3 times a week is they mean Monday, Thursday, and then Monday again. Is usually how it would go, or perhaps Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday. But the idea is they call that 3 times a week because in that week, those 7 days, you received 3 showers. Of course, if you do it the other way and go Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, it's like 10 days to get 3 showers. But that's the trick. And whenever you shower, you have 15 minutes, theoretically. You and your cellie, you get locked in, and the cop will hand you a little safety razor. You're still in handcuffs, of course. He's not going to risk even his safety with the tiny little safety razor. But once you have your razors and he's handed them to you and gotten back, and you have 15 minutes to shave, and then you hand them back out whenever you're done, and they handcuff you and take you to your cell. And you would not believe what guys can get done in 15 minutes. Like the real skinheads back in the shoe, they're not going to stop shaving their head. It's a part of their identity. And so you will absolutely see 2 dudes who this is their program, is that they're cellies and they just attack as soon as they get in that shower in order to have everything shaved down. If that feels like a lot of work back in the shoe, they do have another option. They have the kennels, which is basically just big cages that people sit in. Dog runs is what I called them. And there's a little slot where you can hand something in or out, and they have a set of clippers. So you can go, and if you just want to do a trim instead, that is where you would do it. You would go ahead and give yourself a trim. You can't have somebody in the cage with you to help you. But that is the way that you would keep yourself as maintained as you could. You go down just a little chunk further to lower security yards, call it like a 4-270 or something. On those yards, they have a tray with 100 razors in it, one for every individual with his cell number written on it. And they come around twice a week and ask you, hey, you want a razor? And if you do, they give it to you and you shave, and then the door won't open again until you've given it back out. And they visually inspect it and make sure that you didn't lose a razor blade or something like that. And that's the secure way they do it. I'm told there are even some places where they take the shower and bring it to your cell so that they don't have to let you out of the shower, that they have something on wheels. But I never saw anything like that. It's just what I was told. Hey, K&M finally made it to a live stream. Right on. Prisoners hooking up with guards and counselors. It happens more often than you would think. I'm not sure if I can tell this story without my wife bursting in from the side there, but there was a female officer who, she was so kind to me and we were friendly, and it was unprofessional. There was an occasion where she said, what did she say? She said, I trust you. And of course, to be clear, there was no relationship, not even something close. I don't think I knew her first name. But it was this funny moment where we were isolated from the rest of the institution a little bit, and right then, if I was that kind of guy, I'm reasonably certain that there was a conversational angle to develop a personal relationship with her. This isn't, to be clear, because I'm some suave something or other. I swear I'm not. I stumble over my words as often as not, and I'm a little goofy looking in real life. Probably there in the camera too. But you figure this is a job. And these COs, they work it all the time, and they do, of course, develop some kind of opinion, some kind of thoughts about the various inmates. You work with them all day long. From there, you end up in a position where maybe you are supervising just one inmate. You are escort officer. In this case, I had to work at 2 in the morning sometimes, 4 in the morning. They'd take me out of my cell, and I'd work for 3-4 hours typing up reports at ridiculous times in the morning. She was the first watch officer, and so it was her job to kind of just supervise me whenever I did this. That type get in that type of situation, and from it's understandable. These are human beings. The female COs, they have lives. They're tired or lonely or sad, same as everybody else. It's really not that different than any other kind of relationship somebody would develop with a coworker, except that it's an asymmetric relationship. There's no way for an inmate and a CO to have an actual relationship because, say, they get in a fight or he calls her a name. I mean, she could legit have him killed. A big word, but yeah. And so that's why the administration tends to come down real hard, at least on paper. That's why the administration comes down so hard, and why you can make an argument for it being of sexual assault for inmates and officers to do what they do together. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. I'll tell a story one time. I had an acquaintance, even a friend, and the female CO with whom he developed a relationship quit. She put in paperwork, told the warden what had happened, and they transferred her to another institution, transferred him to another institution, and they got married. Isn't that incredible? She was still working as a CO at another institution. He was still incarcerated at another institution. And she became approved to visit him, and I saw her in the visiting room. What a story. I hope they're still together so they can tell their grandkids that. Now, we're at 28 and a half minutes in, and I want to thank all you guys for watching. I'll keep doing these. You keep watching, and any story that y'all like, you go ahead and toss it in the comments. I'll expand on it. I like talking, so I'll keep doing it. Everyone have a nice evening. Stay safe. And look, I say it a lot in the videos. I'm going to say it now one time, like right now. Your loved ones, I mean, don't take them for granted. They're important, and whenever you lose them, they're gone forever. Thank you. Everybody have a wonderful night.